course of the year, we've been looking at all the ideas and basic principles of Stoicism. And while there are foundational principles which we have discussed, we can also see that the Stoics have commented on much of what we deal with in our daily lives and what affects us in our daily lives. Some of the topics I've spoken about this year deal with specific issues which we're going to be dealing with more in the months ahead. But every now and then we need to stop and look at some very basic principles that remain the foundation of everything we understand about what the Stoics are trying to tell us. So today I want to tell you the 7 basic steps that you can always take to kind of check on yourself, double check on yourself, to keep yourself on the path. 7 basic things to do right from the mouths of the Stoics. One thing that many of us struggle with that is really so basic, and that it seems to have been the struggle of mankind since clearly the Roman times, is how to get up in the morning, especially how to get up on a Monday morning. We all know the experience of not wanting to get out of bed and not wanting to have to get up and do what we have to do. But amazingly, the Stoics had a comment on that, and it's our friend Marcus Aurelius who starts off the topic on getting up in the morning. This is from his book, The Meditations, and he says, "At the break of day, when you are reluctant to get up, have this thought ready in mind. I'm getting up for a man's work. Do I still then resent it if I am going to do what I was born for, the purpose for which I was brought into the world? Or was I created to wrap myself in blankets and keep warm? If you think that is more pleasant, were you then born for pleasure, or for feeling, not for action? Can you not see that plants, birds, ants, spiders, bees all do their own work, each helping their own way to order the world? And then you don't want to do the work of a human being. You don't hurry to the demands of your own nature. And if you argue one needs rest, one does indeed, I agree," he says. "But nature has set limits to this too, just as it has to eating and drinking. And yet you go beyond these limits, beyond what you need. Not in your actions, though, not any longer. Here you stay below your capability. The point is that if you do that, you do not love yourself. Otherwise, you would love both your nature and her purpose for you. Other men and women love their own pursuit and absorb themselves in this performance to the exclusion of bathing or eating. But you've got less regard for your own nature than the smith has for the metalwork, the dancer for the dancing, the money grabber for the money. Yet these people, when impassioned, give up food, give up sleep and bathing for the promotion of their pursuits. And yet you think that social action and action in the world is less important and less worthy of effort? The point he makes, we not only have our own calling, but we must also contribute to the greater good. What could the purpose of a human being be? He doesn't necessarily answer that exactly, but he does say that clearly built into us is action. Just like we have feelings, we have actions, and our actions are purpose-oriented, even if it is some greater purpose than ourselves. So if we honor ourselves correctly, then we need to honor our own actions. If we have our own calling that we must pursue, we must also pursue the calling for the greater good. Otherwise, what is the purpose of living, he asks. So, to sum it up, he says, our purpose is not to snuggle and lie in bed and be comfortable. You do need to do that, but you also need to respect yourself and your passions and respect your purpose. Remind yourself of that when you're struggling to get out of bed in the morning. When your mind is competing the snuggly blankets versus getting up. Getting up is not about giving up the snuggle. Getting up is about getting on with your purpose in life. That's what you're here for. The second very basic Stoic idea is to prepare for the worst. Now, that might sound extreme or negative, and we will discuss that particular topic of Stoicism in the future, because sometimes the Stoics take that much further than we're going to take it right now. Preparing for the worst can be expecting something terrible to happen. There are people who do that, and I'll explain what the Stoics say about that in a future episode. But what we're referring to here is preparing for the worst in the most everyday sense. Life is full of difficult stuff and difficult people. This is a beautiful paragraph from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that has as much value today as it would have had to him. He says, "Say to yourself first thing in the morning, 'Today I shall meet people who are meddling, aggressive, treacherous, malicious, and unsocial. All this has afflicted them through their ignorance of true good or evil. But I have seen that the nature of good is what is right, and that the nature of evil is what is wrong. And I have reflected that the nature of the offender himself is similar to my own. Not a kinship of blood or of seed, but a sharing of the same mind, the same fragment of divinity. Therefore, I cannot be harmed by any of them, as none will infect me with their wrong. Nor can I be angry with my kinsman or hate him. We were born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. So, to work in opposition to one another is against nature, and anger or rejection is often that way of working in opposition." A very profound way of thinking about the fact that we do have to deal with all sorts of foolish people out there in the world. So remember, the bottom line is that we are all part of the same bigger picture. We are all a fragment of divinity. So to imagine that someone else in any way is blocking you or opposing you doesn't actually make sense. Never mind what they're thinking or doing. You need to understand that the greater picture is that somehow we are all doing this together. So you can't blame someone for their role in it. So it's not about writing people off. On the contrary, it properly prepares you in advance so that you can treat them with patience, with forgiveness, and with understanding. We're all in this together. The third step that the Stoics remind us to think about every day is to be clear about our intentions. The Stoic philosopher Seneca said that firstly, we must be sure to actually direct our efforts at something in particular, and then keep that goal in our minds. There is no point, he says, in having directionless action. As you'll see in a moment, that has its own consequences. So by keeping the goal in view, says Seneca, we will establish peace of mind, tranquility of mind. Because it's not the busyness of the stuff that we do that disturbs our equilibrium. When there's a whole bunch of stuff on the to-do list, we often become unbalanced by it. And it seems to us that there's so much that I've got to do that I'm running around headlessly. He says it is not that busyness. It is the wrong expectation. And the wrong expectation often boils down to not having one, not having an outcome or knowledge of what the outcome should be. And that causes us to feel confused and disturbed, and something's never ending. Think about it. A lot of that chaotic feeling of too much to do is because there isn't a clear intention and a clear expectation. So make your intention and expectations clear. Robert Greene says, by planning to the end, you will not be overwhelmed by circumstances, and you will know when to stop. Gently guide fortune and help the future by thinking far ahead. It might seem like it's all in the hands of fate and fortune, but guide it by having a plan and an expectation. It's not about reaching a goal. It's about having it in mind. And having it in mind is no guarantee that you will actually reach it. But not having it in mind is a guarantee that you won't reach it. And that creates the chaos. The Stoics actually say that we are driven to failure, to madness even, by the chaos of action without direction. It's important that it isn't even about whether that's an appropriate goal or whether we're even capable of reaching that goal. Even that is besides the point. And it's really much more about, is there actually a goal? Because when we don't have a concept of our direction, how do we know if we're succeeding along the way? How do we know when we've had enough? How do we know when to stop? We don't know when to stop. Some of us don't stop, and some of us stop by means of collapsing in an exhausted heap. And actually, it just repeats itself the next day. So it's really about having a sense that you're going somewhere. You don't have to be concerned of, I don't know what the outcome of this is. Plan one. Remember, as Seneca describes it, it's a kind of a cooperation between yourself and fate to get there. Make your intentions clear, have an expectation. You'll be able to judge your progress, you'll feel on top of your progress all the time, and you've got a much better chance of getting there in the end. It's also Seneca who gives us insight for the fourth basic Stoic principle that we need to remember every day. And Seneca's message is to be absolutely ruthless with what doesn't matter, what isn't important. One of Seneca's great texts is called On the Shortness of Life, or On the Brevity of Life. And it's really about how we all experience life being too short, we never get to do what we want to do, and it all ends way too quickly. Seneca says, how many of us have wasted our lives when we were not even aware of what we were losing? How much time was wasted on pointless grief? Because after all, nothing really comes of grief. From foolish joys, they're transient. From greedy desires, and from social amusements. How little of your own was left to you? You're dying before your time. Grief, joy, desire, social amusements, all these things outside of ourselves, and many of which are based on obligations. Seneca says, learn to say no to things you don't actually want to do. There's some things you have to do, and I suppose you can't say no to those always, although you can work towards it. But a lot of the times we say yes to stuff we don't want to do, and the most common of those, says Seneca, social engagements. We say yes to social engagements when we don't really want to go. And we might have reasons like, I want to get further in the social world. And Seneca says, you're still distracted from yourself. If you're so worried about what everyone else needs you to do and wants you to do and expects you to do, you'll never have time for the stuff that you want to do. Learn to say no to obligations, to the things you do because others do them. Just because they did it, I want it too. You're wasting your time. This isn't about what really came from you. He also says, say no to distraction, to obsession, to lust, to anger, and even to excitement. Which sounds like a tall order, but follow it through, and it's excitement about external, transient things that often have little value. So of course it's not totally global. You are going to get joyous and excited about some things, and unfortunately you're going to get angry and lusty about other things too. But the point is about becoming aware of what is your life. The reason you don't have enough time, says Seneca, is because you're doing everything that everyone else wants and expects you to do. That's why it feels like you never have enough time. Examine yourself and examine your life, because I'm sure it's true for you too, like it is for all of us. Say no. Don't worry about social consequences. Do what you want to do. Life is too short to put other stuff before yours. You've got to get on with what you've got to do before it's all over. The next idea of the Stoics for successful living is adjust to what's really happening. Don't blindly go forth with whatever's going on. You might need to focus around your own stuff, prioritize your own stuff, think about your purpose and your destination, as all these points have said. But Epictetus tells us the task of a philosophical person is to bring our will into harmony with whatever happens, so that nothing ever happens against our will and nothing that we wish for fails to happen. What a profound thought. If we constantly align ourselves with what's going on, it will always feel that what we then want starts happening and what happening suits us. Don't impose your will on the world. See yourself as responding to the world, receiving from the world. Everything is an opportunity to do something or to learn something. So if something happens to you because of the actions of others, reframe it, not as in how you're hard done by or how it affected you in some negative way. Rather think about it as a lesson. Now, I find the concepts of lessons a little cheesy. And everyone says, oh, that was a lesson and that must be why something bad happened to me. Well, it's true, and it is a Stoic, as you can hear, but a lesson implies I'll learn it and put it behind me. That lesson will never come up again. So lesson is really just a word for inquire as to a useful meaning for this. A useful to you meaning for what's going on here, or for what that's telling me. What for me could that mean? And really just use it about your own life and improving your own life. Almost always it is completely pointless to get into reactions about all the trivial stuff. You know, when we react to things and because we don't like what happened, the only thing that's really changing is our feelings. And our feelings are changing for the worse. We're feeling angry and upset and all of those kinds of emotions, and that's really not going to change anything anyway. So it's not a naive way of saying, oh, everything flows with you and you flow with everything. It's a way of addressing those issues we face when it feels like on the one hand other people are affecting us adversely, and on the other hand what I want isn't happening and I can't get there. It's really about adjusting yourself, watching what's going on, adjusting it to yourself and saying, how do I learn? How do I take a step forward from that? Not in a selfish way, because remember the foundational principles I've been speaking about. The Stoics suggest we are part of something greater, that human beings all work together like bees do, even if we're not aware of it. There is a greater purpose that maybe we don't need to understand. Do bees understand theirs, after all? So, recognizing that, adjust yourself to the greater flow. Keep your reactions to things under your own control by asking yourself, what was the lesson? Adjust to what happens and you'll get to your goal. One of the more prosaic, maybe silly principles that the Stoics emphasize is taking a walk. It's a nice thing to do, certainly a great piece of advice for everyone, but you might know that philosophers and artists, writers especially, have always used time walking in nature as a way to do their work. We all know that taking a walk clears the mind and often helps us solve problems. Basically, it seems that when we walk, when we have when we create the time and space, it starts a process that seems to produce better work in us. I mean, it was the great philosopher Nietzsche who said, it is only ideas gained from walking that have any worth. Typical of anyone who's, making a quotable quote, which is not necessarily what he intended. It's pithiness tends to make things seem a little bit more simplistic and black and white than they may be. It's obviously possible to have great ideas and do great work without going for a walk, because a lot of people do that too. So we don't want to suggest that Nietzsche or the Stoics, would have thought that there's no other way of actually solving a problem or doing your best work. But it makes the profound point that creation of time and space, kind of by taking things into our own hands that way, both creates our relationship with the world and harmonizes us with it and puts us in a correct frame to pursue and achieve some of those goals and expectations. According to the Stoics, it's really about self-nourishment. Nourish yourself, nourish your mind, and you'll find that problems tend to be solved. So it might sound oversimple, but I urge you, take a little walk every day. It's going to help you with everything that has come before, about aligning, about solving problems, about understanding the world, the lessons it's teaching you, the issues of your expectations, the issues of dealing with other people that we've seen. A powerful little tool that everyone is already equipped to do. Start walking. The final bit of basic Stoic advice is to reflect and keep a journal. If you watched the series last year on developing your soul life that I was doing intermittently, part of that was about keeping a journal as well. And it's the Stoics who really emphasize the importance of keeping a journal, because we need to monitor ourselves in order to keep on track. Otherwise, we're not going to really fulfill many of the steps that I've mentioned tonight. So Seneca actually says that it is our failure to look back on our lives that causes us to go wrong. Because we're so oriented to going forward, we might be overly oriented at something that he himself advises us to do. Have a destination, have a goal, know where you're going, have an outcome. But we must not get so fixated on the outcome that we don't recognize what's behind us and what that gives us, how that gets us there. He says we reflect only on things we're about to do, and yet all our plans for the future must descend from the past. By definition, everything that we do arises out of everything that we've done. So, Seneca says we need to ask ourselves some questions every day. Important questions like, what bad habit did I manage to overcome? What would I have said that might have been hurtful or angry that I didn't say? And what did I say that maybe I shouldn't have? How am I better today than I was yesterday? Were the things I did today just and fair? In what way can I improve? And perhaps most crucially of all, he asks, what made me happy today? And what made me unhappy today? Powerful, simple questions. By focusing on those, we can profoundly change our lives. Some people think writing a journal is difficult. What am I going to say? It just becomes, I did this, I did that, I did this and that. That's absolutely true. It does turn out for most people that is itself still a worthy record, because it also helps people track their thinking and their processes. But if you've got a clear guidance, you can do it every day. So why not do it? If you followed along with Soul Life last year, add this to your journal. If you haven't been journaling, do this with a journal. It's a simple process that you go through at the end of every day. What bad habits did I curb? How am I better than I was yesterday? What did I do that was fair? What did I do that was bad? How can I improve? What made me happy? What made me unhappy? It's more than enough to go on. And like that, we consistently monitor ourselves. Self-reflection is not bland navel-gazing, as it's often thought. It is a concerted effort to understand and improve ourselves and make the difficult task of life on earth much more manageable and worthwhile. And that itself is a very worthy outcome. Those Stoics are the gift that keeps on giving and never runs out. This little book, Meditations, has it all, but there are lots of others that I've spoken about. Seneca on the Briefness of Life and Epictetus' Discourses were the other books I was quoting from tonight. I'll be back next week with the month ahead. Don't miss it.